Hello, everyone, and thank you very, very much for joining us so that I can present to you how the Big Solar Co-op can benefit organizations in terms of cost saving and increasing energy independence. Good to see you here today, and we're going to be recording today. We are recording now, in fact, but we'll do a Q&A at the end where we'll stop the recording and you can ask any questions that you like, not in the full gaze, as it were. Great. So I thought I'd start the presentation with an actual picture of a real roof that we've deployed some solar on. This is a client of ours called EcoPack. They're out on the Cambridgeshire Fens and they do food packaging, Waitrose being one of their main clients. And of course, they use a lot of chilling. So they're deploying solar in the summer reduces their electricity costs quite significantly. I'll come back and talk a little bit more about them later in the presentation. And in fact, in terms of energy costs, that's pretty much why a lot of organizations will be looking at this because of what's happened in recent years and the end of 2004 in particular, with that horrific energy spike caused by global events that we're all familiar with. Now, obviously, things have settled down since then, and electricity costs are falling again, but electricity costs are still pretty much tied to gas supply and, and other energy factors. And the geopolitical forces that caused this crisis are obviously still in play. There are other things going on all the time. So it's going to be of major concern. And these kind of spikes can really impact bottom line. So this is one of the areas that we can really help. But how, in particular, can we help? Well, we offer a solution of deploying solar on roofs where we are bringing the capital. We have investment, patient investment that you'll see as I go through this. So we have a share issue that it was initially just a one-off share issue that did really, really well, and we turned that into a rolling share issue, and that's now raised over £2 million in investment. And that's from over 1,000 private ethical investors who are after a return, and we do provide a reasonable return to them, but it enables us to make long-term investors from their inputs into the cooperative, which is the format we have, and those investors become members of that cooperative. We've also secured over £2.5 million in loan finance. Up to date, we may well push on more into higher level of loan funding, depending on the cost of money over the course of time. And of course, some of that £2.5 million has already been paid back out of revenue and other investments. But it does show that, as we grow, we're very credit worthy, and some of the larger projects we do borrow against in order to be able to make them happen. We've also launched a bond, which is ISA wrapped, which is very attractive. So attractive, in fact, that it's raised nearly £500,000 within the last week or so. So that's very promising. As we scale, that's going to be great benefit to us. But of course, the benefit of that to you guys is whatever kind of organization you run, it means that whatever capital you do have, you can deploy doing what you do best, either making your business run better, investing in the future, or doing whatever you do in the community. We also bring expertise as well. I mean, not to blow our trumpets too loudly, but we do have a core staff of 5 at the moment, and that's growing. Jo joined us recently. She's fulfills the project management capacity. I handle client interactions and taking people through our process. John Halley, our glorious CEO, is actually the CEO of Share Energy as well, our parent organisation. I'll mention them again later as well. But basically, a long-standing experience in community energy and deploying renewable projects in John. Chris, who I believe is with us today, is our technical expert. He oversees all of the installers and the technical aspects and the interacting with grid connections and what have you. And then we have Noel, who's working the dials backstage today. She's our communications expert and connects with community organisations as well. Hi, Noel. Good to have you with us. And our glittering partners, we've really, really made strong efforts to find the best expert partners in whatever aspect that we do, be it a supplier of solar panels. We want them to be efficient and ethical and basically provide really good value for our clients, as well as installation organizations, finance partners, and of course the solicitors when it comes to doing the rooftop lease aspects of what we do. And then finally on this, we've got our board of directors. We've got Sonia, John, I've already mentioned, our joint CEO. We have Sonia Bedford there, who has an MBE in her services to renewable energy, particularly on the legal side. And the other guys here, they've got backgrounds in economic development, in corporate accountancy, and in running large organizations. So Gordon, bottom right there, ran Siemens in Asia across 32 nations back in the day. He's now retired and wants to pour his particular technical expertise into what we do. And in fact, as I mentioned on this slide, should have mentioned rather, we have an army of volunteers, over 100 volunteers offering different layers of expertise. Some of them are working on site triage, some of them are working on due diligence and other aspects of what we do. And Gordon is a board member and a volunteer and provides some technical expertise into the mix as well. So we've got a good solid foundation of expertise that we're working with here. The third aspect that we do is we make solar happen, and that's why we exist. Again, I'll sort of elaborate a little bit on how we came to be and why we exist, but we do build solar, and here's an example of one of our clients. This is an outfit called Hornsey Steels. They're based up in Shropshire, not so far from the Share Energy head office. They decided to build themselves a new steel factory because steel fabrication is what they do. And they invited us along to put solar on top of it and charge them low cost electricity as a result of that. And they're a very, very happy client. They're just one of a number of projects that we put in recently. These are some of the others that are around the country, and Big Solar Co-op is a UK-wide organisation. We decided to do that to gain economies of scale and also to be able to make solar happen in the gaps where there aren't community energy organisations already doing that. And we're doing that successfully now. This isn't all of our projects because things are changing all the time. New installations are going in. And in fact, this portfolio client, Mid-Counties Co-op, kind of indicate that. For instance, Daventry, the site that we is there up and running, and our array is providing them with electricity. Blockswitch is in its final part of construction now, thanks to Chris, and I believe tomorrow evening, out of hours, to make sure we don't conflict with their business hours, we are going to be switching on the solar array and making sure the power is flowing on that. And Church Stretton is another one of their sites that we got within our scope. We've looked at 30 sites of theirs, and there's 10 that we will have done by the end of this year. And Church Stretton's going to go in within the next month or so. So that's an example of a corporate portfolio client, and we've got a number of others that we're talking to. Another cooperative elsewhere in the UK and other organisations as well are starting to look at our offering as a way to get clean energy onto their buildings. Okay, so what specifically is it that we do? So we organised ourselves to build, own, and manage the rooftop solar array. So we organise all of that. As I say, we bring the capital and the expertise to make that happen, which means that there's zero capital expenditure on behalf of our clients. You'll see there's a little asterisk there because there is a little caveat on costs. Because it's a legal arrangement that we're entering into, there is a legal cost for our clients. We think that's very, very important because although we've got a very client-friendly set of legals put together by Sonia Bedford and her team, who I mentioned earlier, we do need to make sure that you've had your solicitor look at that, make sure that you're happy with it. We've now 12 projects in, and we've refined those legals to cover any scenarios that we might encounter. We will happily make changes for specific scenarios, but we've got a really good set of legals, and there is a cost to you, of course, of your solicitors looking at that. So we don't want to gloss over that. But the upside is that once we've got our array on your roof, we are, for the amount of the electricity that we're displacing, we are discounting against grid prices between 15 and 55%. Now, the figures on that with what we've installed to date is somewhere between 30 and 50% against grid costs. but I've given a broader range there because we have a pipeline of projects coming through, some of which are really massive industrial units with very, very large roofs that are going to be expensive to do, and that changes the cost saving aspect. But it's looking like we're going to save our clients that amount off their grid electricity um, for what we can displace. One of the other things that we do is we research the most ethical and efficient solar equipment. You saw on our list of partners earlier on a number of panel suppliers, inverter suppliers, and we go to great lengths to make sure not only are they the best in market in terms of efficiency, but they're also ethical. We looked very closely at the Sheffield Hallam report that came out a few years ago about supply chains, particularly in China, unfortunately. And there are very, very few panel manufacturers in the world that can lay claim to having a very clean supply chain that doesn't involve forced labor. So we do research that quite carefully, both on the efficiency side and the ethical side. And we also look, once the solar's in place, at optimizing that. We're obviously very keen to be producing as much electricity as possible and supplying you as much as possible. And of course, if you're putting in things like heat pumps, that will have implications. And EV chargers, the number of our clients, we've looked at EV charging alongside the solar arrays. There we go. So why do we exist from our perspective? So we have a motivation in doing this. We want more solar to happen, obviously with the climate change scenario being what it is. And if we're looking very closely at the science, there's clearly something going on there that we need to mitigate. So we want to lower carbon emissions. And in doing that, we put together the Big Solar Co-op, which grew out of the Share Energy organization, which has overseen and administered over 100 community energy projects now. And they, in fact, handle all of the billing for us. But at the time that the FITS tariff was withdrawn, a number of people from Share Energy got together along with other community energy groups and tried to come up with a business model that was going to be resilient and operate without government subsidies. And that's how Big Solar Co-op was born. Obviously, as part of what we do help to increase your energy independence. Of course, solar is more active in the sunnier months, so it isn't an all year round phenomenon, but we do at least improve your energy independence to a degree, particularly those who are highest using in summer, as EcoPack is. And of course, we leverage our expertise. We are all geeks at heart, and the 5 core team members that I showed you, we do like to show off a little bit and but add some value to the world. So we're leveraging our experience. And of course, in doing all of this, we're also reducing your costs, which is, it's a win-win scenario that brings us a lot of joy as well. Okay, so what comes next? Here you can see a little map of some of the sites that we've surveyed over the last few years. And this has built us up a pipeline of hundreds of potential projects. Now, along with my colleague Joe, who's joined us recently in the last few months, I've been looking at this and refining this into projects where there's a greatest bang for buck, so that we are in our sweet spot and working to our strengths, but also the organizations we work with are saving the most amount of money and becoming more energy independent through the process. So we're looking for ideal matches, as it were. So we can work with pretty much any commercial or community organization across the UK. We're aiming to do a couple of projects per month, and we're almost up to that speed now. It's just ticked above 1 a month, particularly with our portfolio rollouts. And in terms of the size of array we're delivering, somewhere between 50 kilowatt peak up to a megawatt or more in some cases. There's a number of leisure centres that we put proposals in for, and wholesale depots where the very large arrays that we're looking at. So we can go up to that kind of scale as well. In terms of sectors and niches, for the projects we've already deployed, but also those in our pipeline and those that we're negotiating with in terms of delivering projects for, you can see there's a really wide variety. So the type of organization, we can deal with all sorts of scenarios, but again, we're looking for the right kind of match in terms of usage, in particular the profile of the usage and what have you. Oops, screen appears to be stuck. Here we go. Yeah, so in doing all of this, what we're also looking for is happy clients. And this is a prime example And I mentioned that I'd elaborate a little bit on EcoPack. EcoPack is the very first slide. It's about 0.5 megawatt of solar power on top of a food packing um, operation that supplies lots of the large food retailers, including Waitrose. And there's double impact for them because it's a very large array on a very large roof. We actually act as a bit of a shield to the sun, funnily enough, which in and of itself cools the building. And then our electricity supplies their coolers, which is highest in the summer. So it's a really, really good match for us. And Richard, as you can imagine, is absolutely delighted. The quote from him, top right, was the perfect solution at the perfect time for us. They'd literally deployed some capital to within their business for some key projects they wanted to do. And adding £500,000 to put solar on wasn't going to be an option for them at the time, but they used us to do that, and they're benefiting from the cost savings. And if you look on YouTube using those search terms, you'll be able to find that video, and Richard waxes lyrical about the process and what we've done. There's also a quote there from Philip Dunn, who used to be the chair of the environmental audit for Houses of Parliament. He's come along and seen what we've done at Tunbury Wells for Kerry Taste and Nutrition, similar food manufacturing scenario where chilling is quite important. And then there's a small doctor's surgery in Birmingham where we added to some existing solar and increased their cost savings. And there's other case studies on our website if you want to see what we've done for other clients. Okay, so what are the features of what we do? I mean, I've touched very lightly upon our business model so far, but here are the key features. We do the rooftop lease scenario with a PPA, and because we're not for profit, but you can see from the expertise we have behind the scenes, we're commercially savvy. We're able to deliver really, really competitive electricity prices. We set a starting price that we agree with you based on various parameters in terms of the risk profile of the business and the size of the array we're putting in. We work out all of the factors and come up with a price for you, which is then pegged to RPI, which over the preceding 10 years before the energy crisis, RPI was going up at about 3% and energy inflation was going up about 6%. So we would look to see your savings rise over time, being that your rate is pegged to RPI. We've got a climate and a client focus. We've gone to great lengths to make sure that we have a client-friendly lease, which the other points here will bear out. And we obviously want to reduce carbon, and while we're reducing carbon, we're reducing your costs. So we have that double focus, which works for both parties. The airspace lease, which actually we're leasing the airspace rather than the roof itself, but we recognize that you might want to repair your roof at certain junctures during the course of the lease. So I'll put there that we have parameters rather than penalties. There's no penalty whatsoever for repairing your roof whilst we have our solar on top. And so long as it doesn't take more than 4 weeks and it doesn't happen more than twice during the course of the lease, we will come along, remove our panels, allow you to repair your roof, and put the panels back on again at our cost with no revenue penalties at all. And we've factored that into our financial model. So we're covered by our PPA price across our growing portfolio of sites to mitigate against the possibility of that happening on any number of sites. As I mentioned before, we do a really good, strong audit on the supply chain of our suppliers, particularly the panels, which there are some notorious nightmares out there in terms of forced labour. Obviously, that's doing the right thing. It does increase the cost of the panels slightly, but given that the cost of the panels are only 10 to 15% of the cost of the entire job, it doesn't actually inflate the price that much. And it also means you're getting very, very efficient panels as well. So you're getting a good solar yield out of them. So it's the right thing to be doing for many reasons, morally, economically, but also avoids any future PR nightmares if it were to be discovered that you'd gone and got solar that, ended up discovering that they were made with forced labour could be a public issue. And so we're very careful on that side of things. Another key feature of what we do is that we want to offer as much flexibility as possible. And one of the decision points you might be going through at the moment, if you do have capital to deploy, is do we want to own and run these panels ourselves with all the operation and management issues that might arise, or do we want to leave that to somebody else and their expertise, and we just take the cost savings and the differential of the price between the grid and the electricity being charged. So as to make that a slightly simpler decision, we offer a buyout after 5 years. So for obvious reasons, we do tie you in for a minimum of 5 years. And then after those 5 years, if you want to, on a straight line depreciation, we give you a cost of what it cost us to install, and we put that in the lease, and we set that off at straight line depreciation over the course of our lease, which is 30 years if you let it run its full course. And at whatever point after year 5, you want to own the solar and take all of the savings, but of course at the same time you're taking on the management and what have you, then we give you that at the straight line depreciated cost. And we take a view on that, if you revoke that clause, we're getting some capital back that we can then deploy solar on another roof. So we're quite happy to do that. And so just to reflect the graph that we had at the start that was very, very messy and ended in an energy crisis, which, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't really know, what's going to happen in the world of energy costs, but we do know that it tends to go up faster than inflation. And it's a really very simple graph. We just wanted to show the proposition in a very simple way that our price will go up with RPI, and we peg that to whatever the government's standard measure of that is, and we're very open and transparent with that increase year on year, and Share Energy administer that. They have copy of all of our legal agreements of what's been agreed in the PPA, which is the power purchase agreement, and they would administer that each year. And of course, that's going to be below what tends to happen with energy inflation in general. So that just demonstrates quite clearly and simplistically that savings will rise over time. And within our proposals, we would give our estimate of what that's likely to be. So let me elaborate a little bit on those steps. If any one of your organizations wanted to move forward and assess us as an option for you to gain clean energy on your roof, these are the steps that we would go through. So first of all, they'd be an indicative design. So you would just give us a what 3 words reference to your rooftop. Our expertly trained volunteers initially would do a first sweep at that under the guidance of Chris in terms of signing off the design as being accurate and optimized. And that would show you what the array would look like on your roof. At the same time, we would ask you for your usage, preferably your half-hour billing, but monthly billing with an idea of what your usage profile over the course of a working day is and which days are your working days. We can then plug that into the design, and that gives us an idea of how much of your electricity we're likely to be able to, your grid electricity, we're likely to be able to displace with the cleaner solar energy. And of course, that gives us a cost differential and a feasibility. And if that works for both parties and you want to take the next step, these first 2 steps, there's no commitment. And in fact, the 3rd step, there isn't either, but there's a bit more work involved for us. So we'd kind of like to know that there was real interest at that point. We put a commercial proposal together, which demonstrates the financial savings that you get. We show you our assumptions in that and the terms of the deal that we're offering effectively. And that therein lies your decision point. Once you get the proposal that gives you all the parameters, and you decide with your stakeholders whether you'd like to move forward or not. And if you would, you sign a letter of authority, and that basically allows us to start going and talking to what's called the DNO, basically the organizations that we need to plug the grid connection into. And we can see whether we are allowed to connect, which every time we have been so far. And if we can connect, if there are any restrictions. So for example, there might be a limitation to the amount of electricity that we can export to the grid when you're not using it, and we might need to conform to that. Generally speaking, it doesn't impede what we're doing too much. If it does, we might sort of realign the figures a little bit, just so that you know the lie of the land. And that letter of authority, as well as the grid connection investigation, it triggers a site structural survey, formalization of the legal aspects, the rooftop lease and the PPA. And then once we get the okay from the grid, and if you guys are happy to proceed, we then sign the documents and hit the go button with the installers who we will have selected from our network of installers that we use around the UK again, in parallel to everything that's going on there. So if you're wanting to do that, and this makes sense to you in terms of an option for you to investigate to gain solar power on top of your organization, then we have a submit your site button on our website. We'd love you to do that. Always happy to answer questions by email. And on the page where the submit your site button resides, which is get solar. So go to the menu, the submenu get solar, you'll see the submit your site button there. If you still want to run through some details prior to that, then you can book a meeting in with myself, and I'm happy to elaborate on any aspect of what it is that we offer, give you some further description before moving forward. So there we go. That's it for the presentation. Noel, if I can ask you to stop the recording now, and we can go into a Q&A for anyone who would like to know some more.